we go.
All right, we're ready.
Okay. All right. Okay. I am calling to session the Sewer Planning and Zoning Commission work session today at 6 p.m. I'll go with staff. Do you have any comments for us, please?
No comments outside, if we just want to jump right into it.
Roger that.
Okay. We got two things on the agenda today. One is commissioner training, and then we will get into priorities for next year, and we have a document that we can review to start as like a discussion item. But I'll get Jamie to pull up the presentation. And again, the context for this is when we did our priorities last year. It sounds like historically the commission has had some larger scale, maybe one-stop trainings, but we talked about maybe doing smaller incremental trainings throughout the year. And this was an idea by Commissioner Bearhay to kind of just do kind of a basic overview. And so we'll kind of go over this, and then once we get to our priorities, we can review again what we may have missed that you'd like to see next year and kind of continue on in that process. So, but for today, our agenda will be kind of talk about the core role of the commission, your power and duties, which are outlined in your rules of procedure, responsibilities, what the commission is not, the rules of procedure, which won't go into detail, but just kind of a reminder, and then kind of wrap up from there. And so the role of the commission is, I think it's kind of interesting for this body, where city council typically wears just a legislative hat. You get to wear two hats. You wear a legislative hat and a quasi-judicial hat. And so when you're wearing that legislative hat, and there's different rules that, can be kind of tricky to navigate depending on which hat you're wearing. And so our office serves as the technical advisor for the commission. So if you have questions, I know several of you reach out, please continue to do so, or the clerk's office is available as well. But when you're wearing that legislative hat, you're an advisory body, typically for city council. And so code changes up there says titles 15 and 16. And so for members of the public, if you're not aware, Title 15 is the Planning and Land Use Regulations chapter of City Code, and Title 16 is Subdivision Code. And so that's your opportunity to make recommended changes to City Council. Comprehensive plan and other large-scale plans, but that's kind of the big one we're working on now. As we kind of continue in our office with that process, we will periodically bring that to you to advise us on that process. Rezones are an interesting one. Rezones are technically code changes, and so you're making, again, a recommendation to City Council to change the code in regards to zoning, and then kind of just general land use policy in general. But then when you take off that hat and put on your quasi-judicial hat, you're essentially a decision maker for land use applications, and applicants have rights, and so we're kind of in this judicial realm, and it's typically conditional use permits and variances. If you're not familiar with those, our land use table in Title 15 basically reviews pretty much any land use you can think of and where it's allowed in city limits based on zoning district. And it'll tell you if something's allowed outright, which means you don't need any kind of permission from our office. It'll tell you if it's not allowed at all. And then if you see a little C in there, that just means it needs a conditional use permit, which means it's allowed, but it has to go in front of this body. And what that allows this body to do is there's review criteria in code that needs to be followed in order for that land use to be permitted. And it allows you to put conditions on the permit that make it a little more stricter than what code would typically be, as long as it relates to that review criteria. Variances are kind of the opposite. If you have a land use you're interested in but it's not allowed, variances are an exception to code. They also have their own review criteria, and so that application would come before you all. And then appeals. Our office does make certain decisions that can be appealed, and so you would hear the appeal. And then down the bottom, the preliminary plat review, put some question marks there. It's kind of an enigma. You're dealing with applicants, and so in that context, you're kind of wearing a judicial hat, but you're only making recommendations, which puts it kind of in the legislative category. When we were trying to determine where to put it, That might be something we review in our next update of the rules of procedure, because the attorney was like, you could really justify it both ways, but it's good to kind of determine where you might want to put it. I kind of put it on the judicial side for now, because that just seems to be the safest place if you want to put it somewhere. But yeah, we can have that conversation here in the near future. Powers,
Excuse me.
yeah, go ahead.
I thought the appeals was for the council. Give us an example of what we would deal with at an appeal.
If we make a determination, someone wants to apply for a sign permit and we deny it, like we make that decision in our office, and if they appeal that decision, they would go to.
Oh, so at your level?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
at the office level?
Yep.
Staff level?
If anyone appeals, but to your point, if anyone appeals a decision you've made, then
That
it would
goes
go
to
to city
council.
council,
Okay,
correct.
thank you. Appeals by from
Yeah, so we've got 9 powers and duties that are, this is at the front of your rules of procedure. Interpret, code is this first one, and so anytime, so code gives our office the ability to interpret Title 15, Title 16, and oftentimes we can just do that, but if it's an issue that we're just not sure of, it might have a lot of public input, or we just want more transparency with the public, we might bring that before this body to help us kind of make that determination and interpretation. The next one is that quasi-judicial role where you're determining conditional use permits and variances, and then the review the City of Seward comprehensive plan on an annual basis. It says conduct a minimum of 1 public hearing and 4 recommendations to council for consideration. That's pulled from city code, but we've talked to the attorney about that public hearing, and it seems based on kind of how we talk about the comprehensive plan, as long as we're engaging the public, like at a work session where they can participate, that would satisfy that line in code. And so if you remember last year, we had a work session where you helped us formulate the survey questions, and then this year we did the public engagement presentation and had the public there for that. And so, and we'll continue to include the commission as we get into the drafting process. And then to your question, Commissioner Hubbard, like there are 3 areas where you do serve as the Board of Appeals, and so Title 15 administrative decisions, so that's where we're making decisions that can be appealed. One of those is floodplain permits, and so code says that you are the Board of Appeals for that. And then there's an interesting one that I don't know, we might recommend that disappear, but you technically, according to code, hear and decide appeals of administrative decisions in the Title 14, which is the electric code. So
Floodplain permits, because isn't that also borough?
there's so our office does see the city floodplain permit process, and so if you're building in floodplain in the city, you do need to go through our office.
Which is a lot of sewer, the floodplain.
Yep. Yes. And then the last 3, that first one is just, your job is to engage with the public, promote public interest. And I think since I've been here, I've really thought this group has done a good job getting public to attend these meetings and participate in the process. That second bullet is, again, referring to your advisory capacity to make code changes to City Council in those 2 titles, as well as any of kind of the large-scale management plans. And then the last bullet just explains that you are also an advisory role to the borough, specifically with subdivisions and preliminary plats. Like those need to be approved by the borough, so your recommendations go to the borough for that. Responsibilities of the commissioners. Got some legal and ethical responsibilities, and these are kind of tricky because you got to also know like which hat you're wearing. So avoid ex parte communication. That's really when you're wearing your judicial, quasi-judicial hat. And so the who, what, why, where, when. Let's talk about the who and the what. So ex parte communication would be like inappropriate communication with the applicant, with each other as commissioners, or with members of the public when you are going to serve in a quasi-judicial role determining, like, for example, a conditional use permit. And the why, you're essentially a jury in that sense. And so when you serve on a jury, you don't go home at the end of the day and do your own research into what's being explained to you. Like, you have to make your decision based on what's presented to you, and you kind of serve in that role. And so if you're meeting with someone on the side about a proceeding that's upcoming, then you all of a sudden bring to the table additional information that other commissioners don't have, and then was not transparent to the public, to the applicant, and so there's some due process and fairness issues there. When? That's a good question. That's come up recently. So, typically you find out about quasi-judicial proceedings when we send out the packet of information. That's at the very least when ex parte communication should not be happening. However, if it's a small town, if you as a commissioner know in advance that someone would be applying for a conditional use permit, whenever that moment is that you might be aware that you would serve on the commission to hear a quasi-judicial proceeding, that's when it starts for you. So even if you haven't heard of it through our office, once you kind of get something through the rumor mill, like that's when you need to start being careful. And then it doesn't end at the end of the meeting where you have made your decision. There's a 10-day window built in for appeals at the end of every decision you make in that realm. And so you need to continue not to communicate with the public, applicants, each other until the entire process is finished, which typically would be when that 10-day window ends and the decision becomes final, or in the more rare exceptions, when a decision is appealed, then you're still on the hook until the entire appeal process has kind of run its course. And so for a recent example, we have an appeal of a recent decision that you've all made, and so until that appeal process plays through, like, you should not be talking about it. And the where, again, it's good to talk about where. Site visits mainly. Like, again, site visits would be an example of something you should not do on your own. There's a mechanism in our rules where if the commission feels it's appropriate, we could schedule a field trip that would be publicly noticed. But again, you're just coming to the table the best you can. Like, it's a small town, so you're going to drive by a lot of these places, but you're just not going out of your way to visit places that are related to a proceeding that you're going to hear. Go ahead.
Just a couple points. So as earliest on the ex parte is when? Is like 15 days before, because that's when the sign has to go up, right? If there's a conditional use permit application.
Yeah, so
You have to do 15, right?
At the
So
very
if we see that
least.
sign, then we know we're on notes, because a lot of times we don't know that we're going to be dealing with that
Yeah,
until
whenever you
the
first hear
meeting
about
packet.
it is the easiest way. It's like, if you hear, like, if you like have a neighbor that's applying, I'm going to apply for a conditional use permit like a month out, and then it starts for you. Then you need to be like, I can't talk about this. It's not just when the notice is out. It's when you first find out about the potential to serve on this commission.
That's just really hard to enforce or nail down, but anyway, it just seems that it's more official when you see that sign, when that sign is posted
Sure.
on that property.
Sure.
That seems to be the most technical point, but as far as why, or what if there's information that is found out, but it's shared through staff, and staff does a laydown right before? If there's new information, like we get your packet and we say, hey, did we check this, we confirm with you, you come up, we help, say, and then you come up with new information based on our questions, is that okay? And so then there's a laydown, because you said it just has to be from that, from what's in the packet, but if there's new information that comes out through your office, between the time we got the packet to the time of the meeting.
Correct. The
Is
goal
that good?
would be to have any information disseminated be available to you all as a body, to the applicant, and to the public.
Right,
So
so
if the
that
packet comes out and you all have questions, like, again, we serve as your advisor, so you can communicate with us and we can kind of help answer questions the best we can. But if, like, the public has comment on it and they don't want to come but want to send us, then we will send that to you all as a body, we'll send it to the applicant, and we'll put it up on the website so it's available to the public. And the same with, like, if you have questions that you'd like answered based on what you've read in the packet, like, that will be in the record based on, we'll probably include it in some way in our administrative report, or we could do a laydown as well, which again would be something that we would send to you all, the applicant, and the public.
Because the applicant will do that. At the 11th hour, they'll put a laydown down.
Correct.
So we
The applicant
would
can do that. Yep.
And you as staff or via staff can, and the public review.
Yeah, the public have a timeline when they have to submit things by, and that's to make sure that you all have time to review everything before a decision. The applicant doesn't have that same limit, and so they can send something up till right before, but then you always have the discretion to be like, well, we need more time to review this, maybe we should like postpone until we have the opportunity. But again, anything that comes through, like we want to funnel it through our office to make sure it's available again to the commission, the applicant, and the public.
I think we need like an Excel spreadsheet that gives us these timelines.
Yeah. Conflicts of interest, we won't go into too much detail. This is laid out pretty robustly in code and our rules of procedure, but it's something if that applies to you, you'd want to disclose early, recuse if necessary, and then partiality versus impartiality. And so this is where it's important to know which hat you're wearing, because you're almost expected to be partial when you're discussing legislative issues. Like we want people from all over the community to represent this commission, and so you bring your personal opinions, but when you're serving in that quasi-judicial role, that's when you need to be more impartial and you're making decisions based on code. Responsibilities of commissioners, so like meeting behavior, decision-making responsibilities. So there's obviously the expectation to review materials before the meeting, preserve order and decorum the best that we can. Obviously a lot of issues that people are passionate about, but I think this commission has done a good job, and the public have done a good job being able to respectfully share that information, and so continuing to do that. Ask clarifying questions, that's kind of our role here. The clerk's office here is to kind of help in that arena. And then I put QJ at the end of these next three, because again, it's more related to your quasi-judicial hat, but following standards in code versus personal preference, and you're making sure you're tying motions to code criteria and evidence. And so, for example, if you're putting a condition on a conditional use permit, you need to be able to tie that condition, that motion, to the review criteria. And then understanding that public comments contribute to the record, but they don't replace code standards or review criteria. And then you all work as a collaborative body as you deliberate these things. Public process responsibilities, and so yeah, just encouraging respectful comments in hearings, ensuring the public and applicants have a fair chance to speak, and then maintain transparency. I might encourage this group to do this a little more, like if you're going to make a decision, especially on a quasi-judicial proceeding, it's really good to have your reason stated for on the record. Like especially if you're a dissenting voice, or if you're as a body going to go against the record, essentially how it works, if a decision gets appealed, like it's going to go to city council, but city council is not rehearing the case. They're essentially looking at the record of what has already transpired to make sure that the commission made the right decision. So if, for example, you turn down a permit, but most of the people didn't say on the record why, then there's no facts of finding that kind of go along with that, and so that might make that appeal process harder to uphold, or that decision harder to uphold. So
I have a quick question on that. Since I haven't gone through a thing that's been appealed to the city council before, will the city council request the dissenting applicants, or not the applicants, but the dissenting commissioners to present their reasoning for the dissension?
That's a good question, and that would be a clerk's office question, and we haven't got much. This will be my first appeal since I've started, so I'm not exactly sure
I haven't
on the
done
process.
an appeal.
I know the findings that Commissioner Hubbard put forth in that one will be part of the record, because they are, but yeah, I don't know how that gets, it'll be reviewed for sure, but I don't know.
And incorporated probably in the original documentation if it goes the other way, I would assume.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And then what the commission is not, so this might be good to kind of cover to make sure we're kind of staying in our lane. So you're not a legislative body. You wear that legislative hat, but you can't rewrite code or impose new standards in code, right? So that's city council's determination. And then when you're wearing that quasi-judicial hat, you shouldn't really be denying projects because you dislike what the current code is. There's a process to change that code, which you all have a role in. And so that those quasi-judicial decisions need to be made based on the code and not on like community pressure or what public comment was in the moment. You're also not a court, so you act like a court in a quasi-judicial role and must follow due process, but there is a distinction. So you don't apply rules of evidence at a courtroom level, which, means that someone's applying testimony, no one's going to object, and there's not someone here to sustained or overruled like you see on TV or the movies. But so it's a little more casual in that aspect. But we're not interpreting constitutional rights, punishing, disciplining, or arbitrating disputes. And we're not here to mediate between neighbors. You might get a lot of different viewpoints, opposing viewpoints from public comment, and you're not trying to make decisions that, hey, what would be the middle ground or a compromise for everyone that's communicated. You're just really making a decision based on what's in the code currently. And the body's not an advocacy body, like especially in the legislative realm. Personally, you can promote, oppose, champion particular outcomes, but as a body, you're not really doing that. You're appointed to apply adopted regulations, and again, this is that difference between the legislative and quasi-judicial roles, where personal bias and advocacy is expected and allowed in the legislative realm, but in that quasi-judicial realm, that's where we're neutral, evidence-based, and we can't rely on popularity, personal policy goals, but again, what's based in the code and that review criteria. And we work closely together, but we have separation between staff and the commission, and so you oversee applications in that realm as reviewers, which means like our job is we want to be gatekeepers and not bring any conditional use permits that aren't complete, or we're not going to put a conditional use permit application in front of you if it's not even allowed in that zoning district. So we're kind of the gatekeepers there. And keep in mind that staff circulates the application. You work closely with us, but other departments are reviewing these things. So if the building department has a comment about where someone has their parking spaces or where buildings are, like we'll work internally to work with the applicant and pass on that information. It's not really a commission's role to redesign projects and say, well, what if you put the building over here or laid out the parking differently? That's something we can do internally with the applicant and other city staff. You can't require applicants to do better than code requires, which, except for that caveat of conditions on conditional use permits that meet or are related to the review criteria. So that's kind of your one exception. And then, rely on staff's analysis, department comments, and the record. And, there's always the option to pause, postpone if you feel like you need more information, and please reach out to us. And again, you guys are great at that, like reaching out if you have questions in the meantime so that we can come prepared. That really helps us so we don't have a lot of questions in the moment that we don't have answered. And so your jobs are to kind of verify standards are met, not engineer solutions all the time. Sometimes I think we get into worst case scenarios in our conversations with work sessions, but sometimes we don't need to, that's someone else's job to think about, like engineering solutions to those. And at the end of the day, you're really not the final authority on most things, and the role is crucial. The legislative decisions get submitted to City Council for final approval, and even quasi-judicial decisions, which typically are finalized after you make a decision, but they can always be appealed as well. But that's not to say you're powerless either, because you all play a key role in protecting due process. You ensure code is applied fairly and consistently, and I think the work that we do in our work sessions is really great. Like we spend a lot of time developing an expertise that helps like shape the future of Seward based on our land use code, and that's definitely an incredible responsibility that's been fun to work with this body on. Outside that, I'll say rules and procedures. We spent a lot of time on this document, and we ratified this February. If you have questions in the moment, feel free to reach out. Sometimes, like, I spent a lot of time with this document, and so it might be easier for me just to answer a quick phone call, but if you haven't had a conditional use permit application in a while, there's a small section on that. It might be good to pull this out and kind of just reread that section, so you're kind of refamiliarized with what the different rules are, because I know it can get confusing with those two hats that you do wear. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
I have one more question. Is there a way to, you didn't cover when a person or a commissioner wants to reconsider, in the case of the variances or cups, and so that you can't, you have a limited time to do that, is there a way to amend or adjust those so that a person doesn't just, can only reconsider those particular items at the time of the meeting, or that meeting after, or at the end, or it's done?
Yeah, so the reconsideration is a section of the rules of procedure, so it is outlined in that document, so we can read when we do our next update. I think February is when we ratified that one, so I think once we hit that year date, I've been keeping notes of different issues that have come up, and so we can definitely revisit that to see. I think the issue is there was a commissioner who wanted to reconsider a recent conditional use permit, which the language is it'll get reconsidered at the next regular meeting, but typically that's done for, the language was taken from council, which really,
Which is a different code.
it's not, yeah, but they deal more in the legislative realm, and so it really wasn't meant to be used as a quasi-judicial procedure, and the issue comes into place that code takes priority over your rules of procedure, and code says 10 days after a permit is decided, it's finalized. And so you can reconsider it, but if you're not going to hear it till the next regular meeting, and we can't do a special meeting because of public notices, like code's going to take preference. And so if a quasi-judicial decision is going to be reconsidered, it can, it just has to happen in the same meeting that the decision was made before you adjourn. Once you adjourn, then you're subject to public notice to have another meeting or go to the next meeting. So we can clarify that in our next rules update.
The rules and procedures, do you have a copy of that, or do I just get it off the web?
They're online, but we do have a copy that I can give you from our office.
How many variances actually have we done? I don't even remember any variances.
Done a few.
Yeah, I
It's
think,
been a while ago.
It's been a while.
I'm saying the time frame that I can remember, because we kind of started that in the commission the same time, Chair Sullivan, so we had a height variance, I believe, early on that was denied. Then there was a setback variance over on properties by the post office, and then I think it
That was
was the...
approved. That
and
variance was approved, right.
And then I think
that.
the variance for the breezeway was the only other one, which was then denied, so...
Swordfish had that variance.
Oh, yeah, they had a height variance for the OBI, yeah. So, yeah, I guess
Right, right,
maybe
right.
4?
So how would we go about correcting that one to where, you know, to make sure if it's quasi-judicial and we want to reconsider our vote, we would do it within the meeting?
Well, that's just the process. So we can just spell that out specifically in the rules, so it's just easier to understand.
But is it possible to change that?
Can't change the code.
Good.
Like, there's no way to get a meeting in within 10 days. Can't do a special meeting because it would need to be 2 weeks of public notice.
So you'd have to change code
So
to
it'll-
accommodate.
So I guess, yeah, you'd have to change the 10-day
Code.
finalization
Yeah.
time period for conditional use permit.
And would the council do that and not us? We could recommend it, but we can't do it, right?
Correct.
To change code.
Yep, they're the only ones that can authorize that, yeah.
Is that 2? Title 2?
No, I think that is Title 15. Yeah.
Yeah, it's under Title 15, conditional use permits, and then that requirement for, it becomes official after 10 days.
Yeah, because it really puts people in a checkmate position, or at least the commissioners, not the council, so it's just nice to have some time to sleep on it. 'Cause I think
Yeah, we
we're
can-
too much in the moment
Yeah.
when you have to think about, oh, I better change this now.
Or the motion could be to postpone it completely, and then then
That would be
the pressure's off.
best
Yeah.
option. Because reconsideration, we can talk about it, but it's tough, because like, once you reconsider something, it's not a majority vote. You need 2/3 vote to even consider the reconsider, or the...
And you have to be on the
consider-
winning side in order to
And you
do
have to be
it.
on the winning side, yeah.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
So you can't go back and say, oh, I think it's a reconsideration person, and if it makes a 2/3 vote, then you can, to reconsider, then the body could postpone it at that time if there's a motion on the table for that. You can do that
Well, if it's
too.
already passed, you're not postponing it.
No, there's reconsider, the person that voted yes wants to reconsider. So then you bring it back to the body, there's 2/3 vote that has to get it back on the table.
Okay, if it's already been passed, then it has to go to the city clerk. And then
I'm
that's
talking
where-
about a reconsideration. So
At the same meeting, because
Yeah,
reconsideration is
same
also at the city clerk's office. When you have something in your, if you passed it as a commission and you want something to be reconsidered, then because it's done, so you have to go to the clerk to have it reconsidered, and you have to be on.
No, he just said you could do it at the meeting.
That's a different, correct me if I'm wrong. but-
So you could, if it's going to be, the way it's set up now, a quasi judicial decision, if it's going to be reconsidered, it has to be reconsidered at the meeting where the decision was made. It's just a tough, like, if it's 5-1 in favor of a permit, and then you make a motion to reconsider, then you need 4
You're not going to change.
out of 6 now to like reverse it. And so,
But then if you do, then it gets back on the table, and then at that time, there could be a motion to postpone it or whatever, or
I guess potentially, but I would just argue you should just postpone it.
Yeah,
To begin with.
certainly.
to begin
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
To begin with, that's something you have to, but I guess the point was, I'm saying, after the meeting's closed, and maybe that's where you're talking two different circumstances. If the meeting's still going, you do the reconsideration.
Yeah.
But if our meeting is over, then that's where the clock ticks. You have to do 24 hours, and you have to be on the winning side, bring it to the city clerk in order to have it brought back.
But it's a moot point. You can't bring it back because you don't have 10 days. You only have 10 days, and then you defy the meeting notices. So it's a moot point. You shouldn't even.
It may not necessarily be,
It's-
we were doing it with the Hemlock subdivision, and we were going to do that when Brenda was there, and we were going to do that, and she was bringing it forward at the time, and we did, actually.
Again,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's remembering which hat you're wearing, right? It's
Yeah.
not a moot point for and the purpose of it is typically for legislative procedure. So if
Right.
you make a code recommendation,
Oh.
there's no there's no time, if you want to reconsider, we'll put it on the next meeting and not pass on the
Oh.
original recommendation to city council. So we're just talking about the narrow lane of quasi judicial proceedings, but for legislative, and that's the intent of them typically, it's still an option for commissioners to
Right.
utilize.
And that's where at the beginning of the slide where we said preliminary plats were kind of a weird situation because, remember, your reconsideration of the Hemlock
Hemlock
subdivision.
subdivision, right.
There's nothing that says a preliminary plat becomes valid in 10 days, and so we were able to have that on the next meeting as a vote for reconsideration.
So it's whatever the characterization of what you're voting on at the time will dictate whether you can do it at the meeting or you can do it later. Got it.
Lots of stuff. Sticky.
Certainly. yeah.
Very sticky.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for the,
I just got a quick, so on that, what you were just talking about, that permit on Hemlocks that went up for reconsideration, was that voted down or,
that was voted down.
okay, and then you reconsidered?
Yeah.
Well, it was approved and then reconsidered.
Right.
Okay, so it was
And then it was voted
Reconsidered,
down.
correct, yeah. And the reason for that, and just for background on that, is because at the same time, we had a lot of people coming here that specifically wanted it or didn't want it, I forget what it was, but there was a whole group of people that were, I think it was teachers at the time, they were having a separate meeting. They did not get here to have an opportunity to speak. So we decided that the best thing to do is to try to reconsider it, to allow them to come back and have their say, basically their say on the issue as well. That's the reason why.
So did it end up passing again the second time, or did it get
No.
voted down?
No, it's the park's still there.
Okay.
But the odd thing about that whole thing is because that was just a hypothetical, because the city is not in that business of building homes. And they were just putting speculative stuff out there for all those potential developments because everybody wants to figure out where we can put homes. And that was put out there to have the place rezoned for potentially building homes. But the city would never do that because they don't build homes. A developer would have to come in and, do that whole thing there. But the whole thing was to try to get that whole rezoned, that whole area
Okay.
rezoned. But that's sort of a done deal.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, fire department comes in until the fire department wants to be here.
Or, another place, yeah. So, anybody else have any questions or concerns?
No, I really appreciate this kind of training.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
So is a lot of this stuff in the rules and procedures too? Yeah, okay.
But sometimes it's kind of hard to find.
Yeah, and I spent a
Yeah.
good part of a year drafting that, and so that's why I don't have no problem if you call me.
Yeah.
I probably got it memorized and where it is, but yeah, it's good to review from time to time as well.
No,
Okay, well, if we have nothing further on that, we'll move on to the 2026 priority list.
Well, I'll start us off on this, reviewing the priority list. We essentially took the formatting from past priority lists and moved some over that we hadn't completed from 2025, but then added some new ones that we've either discussed as a commission or our office has received input from the public on some issues that we've added as well. So we'll kind of go through these specific priorities for 2026 just to give you some context of why they're on there, and then leave it up to the commission then to discuss if you're wanting to keep all these specific priorities on there, if there's ones you want to remove or ones that you want to add. So if you're okay with that, we'll move forward going over. So the first priority would be addressing, having the commission contribute and collaborate as needed to be a part of the solution for housing issues by recommending changes to the Muni Land Plan and Title 15. And so we have two specific bullet points here to evaluate and update zoning regulations to support the development of missing middle housing types, as well as to review lot size requirements for duplex and multifamily units. So the commission certainly aware of the work that you've already done already to help address the development of missing middle housing, allowing ADUs and DADUs, changing building height, as well as conversations with parking. But there's still other issues that developers are bringing to our attention, and you kind of can view the door blocking middle missing housing as having multiple locks, and so you can unlock, even if you unlock 3 of them, if there's still 2 locks on the door, it's not going to open to allow that missing middle. And so that's why you may think, well, we've already addressed things that should help, bring missing middle housing to Seward, and yes, hopefully it does, but there's still some locks on that door, and so we're trying to address all the issues that may be preventing this type of housing that's so crucial.
I have a question on it. Could I ask a question? So if we're doing that, how come these places that come up that are kind of, middle of the road apartment buildings and stuff for people that are being changed into like hotels and stuff, how are we allowing that? I mean, I'm just curious.
It's not so much a question of we're allowing it, it's property owners can do what they want with their property as long as this code allows it. And so if you're talking about the 14-plex, right, that was, from our understanding, a financial decision. It's an old rundown building that they wanted to renovate, and they needed some short-term rentals to help do that. Yeah, it's, from the allowance standpoint, we'd have to look at the code of where do we want to allow certain developments, and but yeah, it's kind of hard to tell property owners, no, you can't do that with your property if the code allows it.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll kind of go every other one. Comprehensive plan update. So this one, we had our October work session, and we reviewed the public engagement feedback, and so just to kind of give you all an update, we've been meeting and have met with most of the city departments since that meeting. That was kind of our next round of the process to get their input, as well as concurrently meeting with different community organizations. We had a good meeting with the Seward Arts Council last night, and so that's kind of where we're at now, and then hopefully at some point next year get into drafting process, and so that's where I would guess we would loop in the commission again to get some feedback on the whatever draft that we come up with, or at least initial draft language, and so that is kind of what we envision that being for next year.
And the third priority would be to make parking code update recommendation to City Council. This is scheduled for our January meeting, and so is on track to complete this, but we wanted to make sure it was in the priorities, as we've had code recommendations get sidetracked in the past.
Hopefully be able to check one off right away. There we go. Assess where Title 15 can appropriately shift certain development types from discretionary review to by right approvals. And so this will be kind of reviewing the conditional use permits, I think, through some of the permit process. Like the auto repair shop was a good example where we've kind of asked, does that really need to be a conditional use permit? And so we can kind of run through that table to see if there's any regulations that that we feel like are not necessary, as well as looking over the whole conditional use process application itself. We had some trainings on that this last year, and so I think a lot of education, so we want to make sure the application and what the information that we're requiring from applicants is what the commission feels is appropriate for you to help make your decisions, knowing that you can't go visit the sites or talk to applicants, and so want to set you up for success the best we can. So we'll, I think that was one we almost had ready to do when we did the parking one instead, so we'll be able to tackle that one here pretty soon, I think.
All right, and then the next one is evaluate contemporary approaches to zoning and development regulations to determine whether alternative models could better advance community goals. So this would be an area where we could discuss, as Commissioner Verhey mentioned the last meeting, that we are the planning and zoning commission, and so what exercises and planning could the commission do to evaluate the trajectory that Seward is on as far as the land uses that are taking over or becoming more prominent in the community, and if that's the look that we want. And so also, Commissioner Pemberton, this could be an area where the commission could discuss different policies to cap certain uses that may be overtaking areas where housing should be made a priority. And so that's something the commission could focus on, as well as we've had brief discussions in the past about form-based code, but perhaps exploring that avenue a little bit more as well. Form-based code is an alternative type of zoning. I don't even know if it's actually defined as zoning, but it's plays a similar role, but it regulates more of the look and quality versus the actual use. And so with the feedback we've gotten from the comprehensive plan survey results of people value the small town community feel, they value the walkability of the downtown. Form-based code focuses on the look, It focuses on where the building is placed on the property. It focuses on the streetscape. And so these are aspects that would be interesting for the commission to look at, to see can we implement some form-based code aspects into our code? Should we even look at maybe even a broader renovation of our code to address, because our code doesn't regulate at all now the look of buildings, where they're placed, the streetscape, how the streetscape looks, and all these things that really add to the character of the community and the functionality of it.
Yeah, there's an example, where is it? Oh, in Washington, it's Leavenworth. Have you guys ever been there? It's like, it's obvious that it has a theme. And it's very Scandinavian or Latvia or some country in the, yeah, it's just really cool. And it's like, I don't know, kind of gingerbread house look in the town it has, and so that's their theme. And we have a lot of stuff to glean from our comprehensive plan that gives us some ideas for that look.
Next was evaluate zoning and development standards to ensure they support the needs of older residents, promoting aging in place, and create safe, accessible, and inclusive neighborhoods for the community's senior population. If you remember from the survey feedback, right, we asked, do you see yourself in Seward in 5 years? And the longer you live here, the more likely you are until you get to that kind of retirement age, and there's a little drop off. And so, and that's an assumption, but I think a safe assumption that might be, is a Seward a place for me as I enter that part of my life? And so it might be good to evaluate our codes and making sure we can hopefully answer or improve that question. And we put a bullet here, reviewing the mobile medical unit definition and zoning allowances. We've been talking to the health center, community health center here in town, and they have like a little mobile clinic, and they have ideas to really have that be all over town in the future. And some of the places they want to be, it's allowed, some of them it's not, but think that it would be a good service, and so we might be looking at expanding those uses there. So that's why we wanted to put that one on there.
And then the next one is to evaluate our zoning regulations to accommodate to ensure that the city can accommodate temporary housing needs for seasonal or project-based employees. And this follows along the feedback we've received for a while now about the need for seasonal housing, but also specifically looking forward to hopefully address the needs of the Army Corps of Engineers when they move the tunnel for Little Canyon outflow, as well as I know they've already started work on the cruise ship terminal, but they are going to also be working on the freight dock in 2027, and so trying to get ahead of that and make sure that our code will accommodate for seasonal housing needs for those projects and any other projects that may come up.
Review and update rezone application procedures and requirements. And this one is just kind of more bare bones in our current code and current application process. So we just kind of want to flesh that out a little bit and bring you into that process to make sure we're getting that right.
And then finally, to review and update the subdivision regulations. And this is one, unfortunately, that was on our list before, I believe, and didn't get to it, so we're adding it again to 2026. But as you know, our subdivision code is sorely lacking. It lists, what public improvements need to be installed, but it doesn't provide very much, if any, specifications for how or what to be installed, and we've run into issues with that, and so that would be a good one for us to tackle as a commission, to outline some better requirements there.
And then, we kind of didn't do a whole lot with the ongoing priorities. The first one, so I'll review these real quick, just make recommendations as needed to Titles 15 and 16. The Municipal Lands Inventory Management Plan, so again, the review and update of that. This one with the SMIC development plan, we might talk to Tony to see if he sees some sort of collaboration there, because that was on this last one, but it wasn't something that we picked up or they picked up as well. The Flood Service Board, obviously, we've had joint work sessions with them in the past, and so we just wanted to leave that on there in case there's anything is needed. The Rules of Procedure document, when we did that, I was hoping that would be more of a living document, so I want to do an annual review of that, so we'll probably do that somewhat early 2026, and then would love some input on how you felt the trainings went this year, and if you'd like to continue this paradigm of little mini trainings and just kind of get the commission's input of what you would want in that. We don't feel like we need to create a whole list for 12 work sessions. Some of them will just come up organically, but at the same time, if there's something that you know right now that I would love some additional training on, we can incorporate that to make sure those are some of the first ones that we're doing.
Well, that's good. Well, I'll tell you right now, the mini trainings that I think Vanessa had and June had said that they would like to have, I think are really, really beneficial, because that big one we did, I forget what that one, but the one we did, the APA, the American Planning Association, and that took hours to do. I think I had a 22 typewritten page response to all the questions.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And you just don't remember all that stuff afterwards, but these small tidbits, I think you have an opportunity to digest and talk it over and mull everything, so I think it's really a great idea.
I like these, if I may speak. I like these, and I'd like to, I don't know about anybody else, but I think it'd be great to have them so we can put them in our notebooks, take them home and put them in our notebooks. I have my notebook. But I don't know if we can do that or not. I just thought it'd be.
Yeah, are you referring to being able to have a printed copy of the PowerPoints that presented?
I took pictures of this.
Yeah.
We can email that to you, or
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
No
that'd be
problem. I
great,
can
then
email
I
it to
can print it
everybody.
out, I have the whole in my paper.
Yeah.
It's old school. Bear with us.
We can print those off in our office as well, or email them to you, whatever. Yeah, just, that might be a case-by-case basis, let us know what you need, but happy to accommodate.
And I just have one other thing, if anybody else has some more stuff, I don't want to.
I got, I was thinking about all this in writing. My only concern is the long-term effect on the community, not just the short-term convenience. So when we're going through things, that's all I have to say about it.
The balance, I think that's where we had that, in the strategic plan, I think they were talking about that, I don't know if we use that much anymore, but it was a sort of a tripod sort of, you have old school tourism, old sewer, the tourism and basic business to try to keep the town, a little bit balanced, because if it's too much in one direction or the other, it winds up toppling a little bit too. I think that's really a good idea to keep that. I just wanted one thing that I just mentioned too, on review the Seward Marine Industrial Complex. I was wondering about the military footprint there. I don't know if it's pertinent to have them, I don't know how far we are in that, and obviously that's not in our wheelhouse, that's pretty much, I guess, in the city managers and the harbor master's office. But, if we're gonna be considering any of that stuff, do we have to consider that, because they're gonna have that whole dock? I understand there may be housing or whatever else out there of some sort, so I just don't know how much their footprint will affect all the decision making.
I think we're getting a bigger boat with the Coast Guard in. I'm with the Coast Guard.
Right, the new ones, the fast response cutters are coming in, yeah.
They're, when you say future zoning overlay into the plan, I know we talked about this and we did some zoning with, putting in area for housing, but there needs to be some diversity out there and just industrial. You've got a lot going on, and so it almost needs, the development plan, whatever, it just, you need a place for people to live and to have other types of businesses, and it's bookended by 2 parks. So there's...
We've talked to developers out there, and they understand, that's gonna be one of the first steps, is you have your development idea. It's we need to come in front of you all to have the rezone go through. And so I would anticipate that will be happening.
Okay. Yeah, there needs to be some rezoning for some of the area out there. I'm gonna bring up another thing that I think we should look at. We worked to pass these codes and what have you, and we brought this up before about having a code enforcement officer. And would it, to get council to possibly move on this, would it help if we as a commission collectively send a letter requesting that be something they could consider, or even if it's a part-time position or whatever, because we just don't have one.
Can I just say, because I know the council has been working on that and with the city administration to some extent to try to bring some of that together, because we have our code, but then you have sort of the one person, like in Anchorage, they have a compliance officer that does all code stuff. It's not just, our world of code, it's everybody.
It could be code, Title 8.
And so, and I don't know, I know that they were discussing that for a bit. Do you have any idea or remember any of that?
I wasn't there.
No, that's right, you were off council at that time. I stand corrected.
I have an idea that it could come up with that.
Very good, thank you very much.
I'll respond to your question. Essentially, you already have kind of sent a letter. I know when Commissioner Griswold was on, she asked a discussion item to be put on a meeting, I feel like recent meeting, where we discussed, and we sent a memo basically summarizing your conversation and advocacy for a code enforcement officer to council.
I think that's what brought that up.
Yeah, and so it was in one of their packets, and so as far as a body, I feel like you have recently tackled that and have pushed that message forward, so, we can see if it goes somewhere and, resurrect it.
Remind them, nudge them,
Yeah.
because sometimes these things get forgotten about again, and
I don't want to belabor things too desperately much on some of that, but that just so brought to my mind a little bit about the code, marijuana code stuff that we were, all that stuff that we worked on for quite some time, how many months that we did that, and I don't even remember how much is, but moving that further down and putting it on the front burner of the council, so we can nail that down.
We made some progress on that last night.
I know.
Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, I saw the,
So, sounds like it's gonna be on the agenda. Yeah.
hopefully it will be, yeah.
Yeah, if you didn't see last night, it sounds like they will be requesting that second joint work session with this body sometime in January.
January, yeah, so, I'm good. I just want to be sure.
We'll keep you in the loop of potential
On the
dates for that.
actual recommendations that we've made? Or is it just,
Yeah, so
I'm
just
good.
to clarify, you all have not officially made recommendations. We had drafted what the document would have been if you would who have voted on it, but
Right.
you've never made the actual vote. So there's no official recommendation out there that they're just waiting to pick up, but there's the starting point of what we drafted together based on your
well, that's,
conversations.
yeah,
in
the purpose of the work session,
Yeah.
the joint work session, so we
So-
can narrow it down, right?
Yeah, I thought about, and I talked to staff about this, about actually doing a formal resolution to council to adopt our draft. But I don't know if that would help at all, given what's already there, because if that needs to be part of the record for formality, because they're gonna, council, in these, to get things in code for that industry, they have to, there's a lot of other titles that they need to look at than just Title 15. It needs to be comprehensive.
Correct. I would say.
It involves Title 8
Well,
also.
the work session.
and-
I think that's another reason why we're having the work session, to bring those points up. Yeah.
We would include the latest draft that you came up with as part of
Right.
the material for that work session.
And there's work session notes too that go along with that, so they should have a pretty good record to launch from, and if we're present, we can add to that
Yeah.
as well, to that conversation.
Anybody have anything else to offer? Staff, anything you want?
So was that an item that you wanted to see reflected in the priorities list, or?
Well, it would
Since
certainly,
it's-
yeah, it'd run parallel with what council indicated last night, so if we need to do a little bit more work on there, clarify some things, we can do that.
Okay.
Get it fresh.
We can put it on there, and then if
Yes.
something happens before we get to it, then we don't have to get to
I
it.
mean,
but
we
this
might
way
get-
don't
we
forget
got it
about
done.
Yeah, we might as
Yeah.
well have it there.
You can also knock it off already.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I actually was looking at it again, and we might need to, if somebody has some other ideas, I'll let you know. I want to make sure we covered some things, and I just,
We had dusted off the stuff we did, all that work a long time ago, so just make sure, put fresh eyes on it, we're good to go.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it would be prudent to put that on there, and then if it's knocked off, we're good. We got something accomplished already.
Okay, yeah, I would, probably put it on as we have the parking code, kind of make
Yeah.
marijuana code recommendation to city council.
Huge.
Since it's,
Okay.
Yeah, and that'd be good.
Yeah.
So that would,
So how do I access some of these documents, because I wasn't on here, so like this, I'd like to see this
Danny.
Yeah.
stuff that I'm gonna be.
So that's Dan.
That's Danny.
I think for the near future, for you, as like topics come up, if we've had work sessions or documents, we'll kind of send them to you or tell you which work sessions or meetings to watch to kind of get caught up. But yeah, we have access to those.
It'll be like drinking from a fire hose for a while.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anybody else, anything? No? Okay, well, I will adjourn this work session at 6:58. There you go.